So let me get this straight. Scott Moe, the guy who spent the last few years basically treating Ottawa like that ex you refused to text back, is now boarding a plane to Beijing with Mark Carney. Yeah, the same Scott Moe who made a political career out of telling the federal government to stay in their lane is now flying economy plus next to the Prime Minister for a romantic trade mission to China. If that's not character development, I don't know what is. Welcome back to Canadian Insights, where politics is messier than a Tim Hortons after a hockey tournament, and today we're unpacking the geopolitical buddy comedy nobody saw coming. Now, before you think this is just another boring trade mission where politicians shake hands, eat fancy dinners, and pretend to enjoy cultural performances they don't understand, let's talk about what's actually happening here. Because this trip is loaded with more subtext than a Jane Austen novel. We've got Scott Moe, Premier of Saskatchewan, land of wheat fields and conservative strongholds, teaming up with Mark Carney, the Liberal Prime Minister who literally used to run the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. These two have about as much in common as pineapple and pizza, and yet somehow we're watching them work the international diplomacy circuit together like they're auditioning for a political version of The Odd Couple. The official line is that this trip is all about strengthening diplomatic and economic ties with China. You know, the usual suspects: trade, investment, long-term engagement, inset buzzword here. But here's where it gets spicy. Moe himself said that Canada and Saskatchewan need a strong relationship with China and that these meetings support the process of recalibrating how we work together. Recalibrating. That's political speak for we really messed this up before and now we're trying to fix it without admitting we messed it up. But let's pump the brakes for a second and talk about the elephant on the plane, or should I say, the canola in the cargo hold. Canada's relationship with China has been rockier than a gravel road in rural Alberta. We're talking years of tension, trade disputes, the whole Meng Wanzhou extradition drama that had more plot twists than a Netflix series, and let's not forget the arbitrary detention of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. It's been messy, folks. Really messy. And Saskatchewan, being the agricultural powerhouse that it is, felt every single punch. When China decided to play hardball with Canadian canola, guess who got hurt? Saskatchewan farmers. When beef and pork exports got caught in the political crossfire, Saskatchewan producers were left holding the bag. So now you've got Moe joining Carney on this mission, and you can bet your bottom lunai that Saskatchewan's agricultural interests are front and center. Because let's be real, Saskatchewan doesn't just grow canola for fun. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and China is one of the biggest markets. When that tap gets turned off, it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's real people, real livelihoods, real communities that take the hit. And speaking of hitting things, let's address the irony that's thicker than Saskatchewan gumbo. Scott Moe has built his political brand on being the premier who doesn't play nice with Ottawa. Seriously, this guy has challenged federal policies more times than I've challenged myself to eat fewer Timbits, which is a lot. Carbon tax? Fought it. Fertilizer emissions targets? Nope. Federal gun legislation? Not in his backyard. Moe has basically turned federal-provincial relations into a contact sport. And yet here he is, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Prime Minister, singing kumbaya about Canadian interests and diplomatic recalibration. Now, some people might call this hypocritical. I prefer to call it pragmatic. Because at the end of the day, Moe knows that Saskatchewan can't go it alone on the international stage. You need federal backing, federal resources, and federal clout to make these big trade missions work. It's like showing up to a potluck. Sure, you can bring your own Saskatoon berry pie and call it a day, but if you want the full spread, you've got to work with the rest of the team. But let's zoom out for a minute and talk about what this trip actually means beyond the handshakes and photo ops. This isn't just about selling more canola or beef, though honestly, that would be great. This is about Canada trying to reposition itself in a world where economic and diplomatic alliances are shifting faster than a Calgary Stampede chuckwagon race. China is the world's second largest economy, and whether we like it or not, they're a major player. Canada has been walking a tightrope, trying to maintain economic ties with China while also keeping our security and values aligned with allies like the United States. It's the geopolitical equivalent of trying to keep both your parents happy during a messy divorce. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Mark Carney, for all his fancy economic credentials, is still relatively new to the Prime Minister's office. He needs wins. He needs to show Canadians that he can deliver on trade, on jobs, on economic growth. And Scott Moe? He needs to show Saskatchewan voters that he can bring home the bacon, or in this case, the trade deals. So this trip is mutually beneficial. Carney gets to look like a serious international statesman, and Moe gets to look like he's fighting for Saskatchewan on the world stage. It's a political win-win wrapped in diplomatic niceties and probably some really awkward small talk on a 14-hour flight. Now, let's get real about what recalibration actually means, because it's not just a fancy word to make this sound more important than it is. When Moe talks about recalibrating the relationship with China, what he's really saying is we need to find a way to do business without stepping on each other's toes every 5 minutes. Because the old approach clearly wasn't working. China would get mad about something Canada did, slam tariffs on our exports, and then would all act surprised like we didn't see it coming. It was a cycle of dysfunction that would make even the most dramatic reality TV show look tame. Recalibration means setting clearer expectations, opening up better communication channels, and hopefully, finding some common ground where both sides can benefit without turning every disagreement into a full-blown trade war. It's basically relationship counseling, but for countries. And just like relationship counseling, it only works if both parties are actually willing to put in the effort and stop bringing up that thing from 3 years ago. But here's the thing nobody's really talking about, and it's the uncomfortable truth sitting in the corner of the room eating all the spring rolls. Canada is caught between a rock and a hard place, and that rock is the United States, and that hard place is China. Our biggest trading partner is the US, but one of our biggest potential markets is China. We want to diversify our trade relationships so we're not completely dependent on American whims, but we also can't afford to tick off Washington while we're cozying up to Beijing. It's a delicate balance that requires the diplomatic finesse of a Cirque du Soleil performer on a tightrope made of dental floss. This trade mission is part of that balancing act. Carney and Moe are trying to signal to China that Canada is serious about engagement, while also trying not to send alarm bells ringing in Washington. It's exhausting just thinking about it, let alone executing it. And the reality is, no matter how successful this trip is, there will always be critics. Some will say we're being too soft on China. Others will say we're not doing enough to protect Canadian industries. You literally can't win. It's like trying to pick a movie on Netflix with your entire extended family. Someone's going to be unhappy no matter what you choose. So what does all this mean for the average Canadian watching this unfold from their living room couch? If this mission goes well, we could see improved trade flows, which means more export opportunities for Canadian businesses, more jobs in sectors like agriculture and manufacturing, and a more stable economic relationship with a massive global market. For Saskatchewan specifically, it could mean getting canola exports back on track, opening up new markets for potash and other resources, and giving farmers and producers some much-needed certainty. But if it goes poorly, or if this is all just performative diplomacy with no real substance, then we're back to square one. Trade tensions continue, Canadian exporters keep getting caught in the crossfire, and the whole recalibration thing becomes just another buzzword that politicians use to avoid admitting they don't have a real plan. Look, at the end of the day, politics is weird, international relations are complicated, and watching Scott Moe and Mark Carney team up for a trade mission to China is proof that we're living in the strangest timeline. Whether this trip delivers real results or just makes for some interesting Instagram content remains to be seen. But one thing's for sure, Canadian politics never stops being entertaining, even when it's wrapped up in diplomatic language and trade policy. If you made it this far, you're clearly as obsessed with Canadian political drama as I am, so do me a favor and smash that subscribe button because we're posting multiple videos every single day breaking down everything happening in Canadian politics. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next dose of political chaos, drop a comment telling me what you think about this unlikely diplomatic duo, and I'll catch you in the next one. This has been Canadian Insights, where we make politics less boring, one video at a time.